the year, for this academic year. It's our seventh series. It's our fifth event. Thank you. Yeah. And we're delighted to have Zane Sinclair with us. Just to remind you, this is a collaboration between BEST and Bermuda College. And the whole purpose is to raise environmental awareness and various topics around the environment that affect us. So today is an interesting one because it's a little bit different, leveraging service to jumpstart your career. And we in Bermuda rely on a lot of charities to do lots of environmental services for us. So it's really important that we understand how we can connect with these charities, how we can do better ourselves and move our environment forward by being part of this whole system. So without further ado, we have Mr. Zane Sinclair. Thank you.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it. Great to see so many familiar faces. Well, maybe not so many, but great to see familiar faces in the crowd. I think I only don't know about two. But yeah, my name is Zane Sinclair. Pleasure to meet you all. I'm 21 years old. And today I'll be, give me a great introduction, but, today I'll be talking about, making sure how can you guys leverage, volunteering and different kind of, interactions with nonprofit organizations, give a jump start into your career, to grow, to scale, and to gain experience that you may or may not have from a job at the moment. So, title of this page will be Purpose, Progress, and the Power of the Third Sector. So, I'm sure you guys have heard the name before of the third sector, but actually, what is it? It's an amalgamation of different nonprofit organizations. You see, we have, different voluntary community organizations, social enterprises, cooperatives, even though those two specifically are in Bermuda, but, there's more interest and, momentum going towards these type of organizations that have been driven, not so much by money, well, it's important to make sure your organization is financially stable, but, being driven by the mission and the importance of actually solving a problem on island. Fun fact from the Bermuda Foundation's 2024 snapshot, over 260 charities in Bermuda are responsible for raising $173 million annually. That's a small government department. And, it's a great read if you read the Bermuda Foundation's reports every year. But it's really interesting to see how these charities have the opportunity to not only make an impact locally and, for the people they're serving, but also financially. I think a lot of times people underestimate sometimes the amount of money that's necessary to actually run some of these operations and initiatives and projects and programs with islands. It's a very expensive process. And so sometimes I like to think of the third sector as a kind of the hidden pillar holding up our community. And just, by a raise of hands, how many of you in here work, for a nonprofit or have volunteered with a nonprofit? So I don't see some hands. That's perfect. I mean, that means you have opportunity to engage, deeply or deeper if you would want to. So by the end of this presentation, I'm hoping, that I've given you a good understanding of the opportunities that come with participating and volunteering with organizations and the opportunities that you can get in the career side, as well as for people in senior management or who are in leadership roles with these nonprofits, some opportunities to make it more engaging and, give some incentive to get used to. So what is volunteering? It's basically, giving time and energy and skills towards different community organizations, without initially expecting payment. When you hear volunteering, I know sometimes it could be a bit of a, weird word. A lot of times we think of volunteering, picking up trash, planting mangroves, sometimes tasks that may seem a bit mundane and fun facing. But I think sometimes when you get into it and you explore the other opportunities around volunteering, you realize it's not just picking up trash. It's a lot of work that goes into it. A lot of the skills around that work could be very valuable for you in your professional growth. So why do people volunteer? Of course, to make a difference in their community, to build skills, experience, connect with like-minded people. And I know through volunteering, a little background about myself, it's always been something, that I guess I want to do. I know some of you are still figuring out, what you may want to do after you graduate from college or, go into a career. But I think at the, front of a lot of people's minds, like people want to help people, you want to solve a problem. I remember when I was younger, one of the people coming in to talk to me when I was at Barclay, I would be like, instead of trying to help me figure out what my career I wanted to go into, was instead of how much money you want to make, or other factors that go into determining what career you want to go into. It's like, what problem do you want to solve? There's a lot of problems out there, and there's a need for those problems to be solved. So just kind of find one that resonates with you, that gives you fulfillment. And I think that's a great start to figuring out what you want to do. Where does volunteering happen in Bermuda? Beaches, parks, farms, as well as nonprofit offices and community centers. I think even though we're a 21-mile island, we're super small, you'd be surprised by the amount of topped off beaches and parks that are littered with trash that need cleaning, or a lot of community gardens around the island that need assistance with planting, or even just some of the office buildings you see in town that you've never been in, and they're like, oh, well, there's a whole organization and a community center in some of these buildings. So get out there, explore. Even though we're a small country, I think there's a lot of infrastructure, programs, and systems in here that are pretty interesting to engage with, as well as schools, churches, and even volunteering online. Just because I don't know. My father is Jamaican, so half of my heritage is from another country, and there's been plenty of opportunities to volunteer online to assist with different marketing, different programs, different systems. So if any of you are, of a different heritage, or have your bloodline coming from another place, or even you're just interested in going to another place, I think there's a lot of opportunities to engage with different volunteering opportunities online. When can you volunteer? During your free time, after school, on weekends, during holidays, or even if you are good at multitasking, you could coordinate accordingly to where you could volunteer while school's going on or while work's going on. I wear many hats that I'll get into later, and I think through juggling a lot of those different tasks, I know sometimes multitasking can be a bit much, but I think it's also a great way to gain different experience in different sectors that can help you kind of use that multilateral approach to develop yourself in your career and your skill sets, etc. And then how can you start? You've got me. So please come up to me, ask my email, find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Snapchat. I think there's a lot of opportunities out there for volunteering and for some of the opportunities being in sectors that, while I may not be in, I may know somebody in those sectors. So, I love to pay it forward. I love to do introductions if, anybody wants to get deeper involved. And yeah, so check on Facebook, Instagram, the newspaper. I don't know how many of you in here found me from the newspaper, but that's a great thing to read. If some of you don't read it already, and a lot of people don't read the newspaper, but it's definitely a great resource to find out some information that may not always be available online. The importance of volunteering. Sometimes, I'm not that old. I'm 21, so some of the young people in here, I'm not like an ancient fossil or nothing like that, but I remember growing up in Delwood and Berkeley and in Harrison as well. There will always be community groups that come to the school, talk about what they do, engage with the youth, tell us the importance. And sometimes it went over my head. I didn't really understand the importance of volunteering and giving back to the community. Actually, to be quite honest, before I started my business and getting involved in this work, I actually wanted to leave Bermuda when I was 18 and never look back. I remember telling my parents, I'm leaving, I'm never coming back. I'm Bermuda, like I don't care all this blase. But looking back now, I'm like, well, I was a little ignorant. And now that I'm older, love my country. I love giving back. And anytime you work in community development, you have to help develop that community. And why would I develop any other community than the country I'm in, right? So, that's kind of my ideology around it. But it's definitely a perspective that I think is worth taking on and looking at. This is your home, and if you have a second home, then also look at how can you get involved in that community if you aren't already involved. I think it's really, important sometimes to give back to your community. Island-wide support networks, the networking opportunities, through volunteering and the opportunities you have to connect your skills to organization looking for somebody just like you, or connecting in different people to, assist with projects like just that. I remember they say it's like literally like 2 separations of distance. You could find anybody there. And I feel like, just going to the people in this room, you could probably get to really high and powerful people. So just make sure to leverage your community. And I think that's a really great benefit of volunteering as well. And volunteers do fill gaps in a lot of these sectors. A lot of times, organizations, even the government doesn't have money to do a lot of different programs or give people in some far-reaching areas the support they need. So I think volunteering definitely fills in that gap. So back to my previous point about volunteering being one of the unseen pillars of the community, I think it's a really, 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 really important sector. And if it didn't exist, I know many people continue to suffer, and people already suffer on the islands. There's actually this great documentary called Poverty in Paradise. I don't know if anybody's seen it. Okay.
Can you get it on YouTube?
You can get it on YouTube. It's a documentary series discussing, poverty on island and the suffering people go through. Well, even though we have these rich organizations here, we have a high GDP, blase, people on the island still do suffer greatly and are disenfranchised greatly on the lower socioeconomic scale. So I think when you think of volunteering, you think of these charity organizations, sometimes they're a lifeline to the people that are suffering the most. And I think that's a very, very important reason. And, another good reason of the importance of volunteering. And they're essential during crisis. During the hurricanes, you may not think people are out, but I know the Red Cross and other organizations, they have things called fresh responders. Is anybody familiar with the term fresh responders? If not, what they are. They're people, volunteers who go out to assist the kind of cleaning up of the island, the cutting down of trees, etc. I think a lot of times they're the unseen heroes when hurricanes do hit. And the fire service, the regiment, police service, any other people do these municipalities that can assist. They're the ones who kind of help to fill in the gap. And they're actually not too many anymore. They're struggling to find volunteers to be fresh responders during hurricanes. If anybody would ever, I guess, be open to the idea of being a fresh responder in these crises, then, definitely consider that. And even economic downturns, I was like 5 during the 2008 crisis. But I know, a lot of, people definitely, assisted pro bono to help getting the organizations back out and running. I don't know too much about that. I was 5 years old, so but I read about it and the importance of it as well. Different types of volunteer work. I think it's very on brand to start with environmental volunteering, as this is a conversation due best at the moment. There's ABB, there's trash cleanups. They're very important. Something a lot of people don't understand is, or maybe not have knowledge of, the trash that washes up on our beach. While a good portion of it is from the locals, a large portion is also just trash coming in, following the Gulf Stream, coming in on our beaches. It's something that constantly needs to be cleaned up, and I think it's going to be that way for the rest of my life, at least. Hopefully my kids or my grandkids, or our kids and our grandkids, will not experience that. But for us, for the foreseeable future, the beaches will have to continue to be cleaned up. And so the importance of KVB, I think, is sometimes overlooked, but it needs constant work to make sure that our beaches stay beautiful, the marine life around our beautiful island and our EEZ is protected. So it's definitely a great organization to participate. There's the Climate Summit, there's the Eco Schools, there is BASS, there's the National Trust, there's a lot of different community organizations. I know the National Trust walkabout's coming up in like a few weeks.
Next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday. Okay, perfect. If anybody wants to participate.
Children's Walk.
Children's Walk? Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Volunteers there.
Yeah, that's funny. A lot of community gardening, farming opportunities through these community garden initiatives. I don't know, does anybody in her garden? I don't know the young people. Do you guys garden? No. You used to garden? Okay. Well, I know a lot of seniors, I'm gonna get into my background in a bit, but when you engage with a lot of seniors, they're like, it's a lot of elderly people. Sometimes it's the only opportunity they have to get out of the house, get involved. I think just paying it forward, helping out a senior in the garden for a quick second. If you have any senior neighbors, I think goes a long way. And just even like social engagements, helps them to get out the house. It helps even like people in the community gardens who, if you can lend a hand to assist, I think that's a great initiative. One of the initiatives I'm gonna get to, we did a program where we went to seniors' homes and created box gardens for them because they were struggling to afford medication or food. So we provided them box gardens, helped them grow food, and they loved it. Like literally, I was sitting with like 10 elderly women like every Sunday, bless their hearts, drinking tea, eating crumpets, and literally one of them emailed me when they saw my presentation in the newspaper. I was like, hey, I have a great presentation. Like literally, since I graduated high school, I have friends who are like 80 years old. I go check every weekend. I think it's and all of that through helping out in the garden. Sometimes these full circle opportunities or these full circle moments come back, to really support you in your development as a young person, just to engage with young people. So just doing these volunteering activities, you just never know where they can lead you in life, in your career, and in general. Humanitarian work, feeding programs like Eliza Doolittle Society, Meals on Wheels. I don't know if some of the young people read the most recent report out of home. Maybe some of the older people in here have, but I believe there is over 1,200 homeless people on island. And that number is growing rapidly. That number is probably larger, you know what I mean? So a lot of times people don't realize how important these meals are. Like, if these people don't get the meals, they're not going to eat. And if they don't eat, what happens, right? You know, they're going to die. So I think it's really important that, you know, there's these opportunities to give back through these feeding programs. I think it's a part of volunteering that's really overlooked. But nevertheless, I'm not going to spend too much time on that. But definitely the humanitarian work. While in Bermuda, we're an affluent country, it looks different. You know what I mean? This humanitarian work looks different. But at the same time, it's still very necessary to keep the well-being of these people, you know, at a state where they can at least live a, you know, decent life. Clothing and shelter drives, mental health and emotional support, and back to hurricane relief coordination. Has anybody had their roof fly off, their windows fly out, their houses collapse during a hurricane? I hope that never happens to you, but it happens to plenty of people on island. And you guys know how expensive houses are in Bermuda. The average house is like $1.2 million. The renovations are also just as expensive. And the impacts a hurricane can have on somebody whose house is devastated, the property is devastated, could be very long lasting. And it could really put them in such a financial hole that they may never be able to recover. So I think a lot of times when you think of hurricane relief coordination, it's not just fixing and, you know, clearing trees from roads, it's also like saving people's, you know, livelihoods, their houses. You know what I mean? So that's another important piece of humanitarian work. And then educational support, mentorship programs, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Mirrors, reading programs in school, homework clubs, and tutoring, career guidance, and youth leadership. Has anybody been to the tutoring here at Bermuda College? Any of you guys ever got to? Hey, everyone is very smart. Good for you guys. But I know there's a lot of people here that rely heavily on tutoring. Not everybody learns the same. And a lot of times people don't realize like that tutoring is expensive. You got to pay the tutor, you got to fundraise for the tutor, and these things. Well, I think for a big portion is volunteering, and a big portion is also necessary to be fundraised for. And sometimes tutoring is a difference somebody has, whether they graduate or whether they don't. So that's another, these are just different types of volunteer work. So yeah. Okay, I hope nobody takes pictures. This is a picture from when I was like 16 at Berkeley. I was convinced I was going to be a psychiatrist. I was going to study in British UBC in Vancouver. I did a presentation. Who went Berkeley in her? You remember Mr. Frederick? So we did a presentation in geography, and he made us think of like, what career do you want? Where do you want to live? What do you want to do? I wanted to help people, right? So I wanted to be a psychologist. You know, my friends confided in me. I'm like, oh, that's the one. That's the career I want. The whole time, like, you know, life took me on a very different road. But I had an internship. I was 16. It was like started in January 2020, and then like halfway through in March, we all know what happened, right? So, it's safe to say, I no longer had really the interest in going through the medical route. One, because I realized it took a decade to get where I wanted to be. And plus the pandemic hit, I was like, these medical workers are superheroes. And I just didn't think I had what it took to be a part of that career. So I dropped it. I was no longer in the medical, obviously my internship ended, you know, I couldn't work at the hospital anymore. But I literally was like, okay, now what do I do? Like what do any of us do? I don't know if you guys were like young in the pandemic hit. Well, we were like 12.
21.
Pardon me?
21 as well.
Oh yeah, it might be that. Okay, I think you guys are much younger. So yeah, you know, we were young. I know I didn't know what I wanted to do after that. But after that, during that process of trying to find out what I wanted to do, I wanted to start a business. Oh, I actually wanted a job. You know, I went to Braun & Co. I went to Miles. I'm like, hey, you guys hiring? I'll stack shelves. I'll do something. I needed money really badly. And then, you know, nobody wanted to hire me. Jokes on them now. But looking back, it's so funny because my sister, one of them, sent me a program for BDC, Bermuda Economic Development Corporation. They had a summer program for entrepreneurs. I was like, shoot, why not do it? I was doing a bunch of gardening. Like, so my father's Jamaican. In Jamaica, we have plenty of farms. We live for our family, they have farms. My father was a farmer, and my grandfather was a farmer. His grandfather was a farmer, you know, so we were all farmers, I think. But, you know, that skill, that intrinsic knowledge I had of gardening, of farming, was something that I was like, hey, do you think it'd be a good idea if I just started, you know, creating gardens for people? Everybody was on the gardening stuff in 2020. I don't know if you guys had TikTok back then, but everybody wanted to garden and was engaged and, you know, doing those type of activities. I'm like, hey, what if I start doing gardens for people? Wrote it up in a business plan, put it forward, got the funding to start, and it took off, it blew up. You know, it was an amazing experience. I got a great write-up in the paper. And, you know, I had hundreds of people. I have messages to this day I have not answered. I haven't been able to answer because of just the overwhelming, you know, appreciation people have for the business back then. I often say I was suffering from success because I was like 17. I didn't know how to run a business, especially with like hundreds of clients wanting to engage. But that journey took me like, whoa, took me on definitely a really, really interesting journey. And that's something I'm going to talk to you guys a bit about for the next few slides. So also keep in mind, this is a very full circle moment that I'm going to come back to this. You know, there's a very interesting opportunity that through gardening, I was able to circle back to an opportunity through wanting to become a psychiatrist and wanting to go to Vancouver. I'm going to get to in a second. So through different, organizations like the Eco Schools of BVI, I started when I was in S4. That's the far right picture. I was part of the garden club. I actually did Barclays Garden back when I was in high school, participated in different gardening programs with different schools. Youth Climate Summit, Shuttle's already in that picture. Can I use it? But different engagement opportunities with the Youth Climate Summit was actually the first thing that introduced me into like, what is climate change? What is sustainability? What is eco? What are these buzzwords? I knew Greta Thunberg, but I didn't really understand how gardening connected into these opportunities. And so coming back to these opportunities, just through that opportunity of being involved with the Youth Climate Summit, I started deepening my engagement. Plenty of different organizations on island. Those opportunities that took me all over the world. It took me to Dubai for COP28. That is the United Nations Conference of Parties around climate change. It's the highest level of negotiations that go on. It took me to Mexico for regional conferences around international organizations. I just came back from Switzerland in November at the UN conference. Presented several different business models, opportunities for the audience. Really took me on this whole journey of activism, aligning opportunities to allow me to, I guess, be an activist, to, touch base and advocate for these different opportunities. And it's also given me opportunities as an entrepreneur, activist, as a young man, as a young Black man. It's putting me in rooms, with thousands of people. It's allowed me to talk in front of hundreds of people about our country, bring back opportunities. I just think the opportunities you get when you're in a career or in a sector that's fulfilling, that you want to be in, or just the opportunities that get to you when you're doing something that's really true and authentic to the type of person and the type of career you want to be in. I think a lot of full circle moments come up. So in the top left corner, that was last week. I just came back from Vancouver. I was the International Association for Youth Mental Health. I recently started a position as Bermuda's first ever Youth Mental Health Plans National Coordinator. So I help coordinate projects around the Youth Mental Health Plan on island. It's an amalgamation of all different mental health providers, government organizations on island around youth mental health. And so funny enough, it was in Vancouver, the same place I wanted to go when I was in school. Doing what? Mental health. What did I want to be? A psychiatrist. I'm like, who would have thought 5 years later I'll be, different, different path, but still like, you guys can see the synergy, right? Between those two things. And so just the opportunity being able to do that was a really full circle moment. So I just want to, drive home the point that when you're working, volunteering, being an activist in these spaces that really fulfill you, or that, talk to you, that you find, I guess, fulfillment in, you identify in. Sometimes life takes you on these really like serendipitous rides, you know what I mean? So it's a really interesting opportunity. I deeped it when I was out there. I'm like, hey, this is a really full circle moment. And the opportunities I had to do that, one, I came when I was a contractor that paid me really good. So, it's a really good opportunity from working for many years, not getting paid pro bono. It actually creates these pipelines for you to get these paid opportunities. I think a big word, it's like almost like once we are talking with organizations around volunteers, like paid is like a bad word. Sometimes like, it's interesting because sometimes, especially I'm sure some young people can relate in here, when you're working with certain organizations, you're doing a lot, you're putting a lot of time in, but there's, this gold, what is a gold chest at the end of the rainbow, and that's sometimes opportunities to come in and work with organizations and get paid, because we all want to get paid, right? I'm not crazy. We all do want to make a living. So it's definitely a full circle moment. See, these are some of the skills you gain through volunteering, project management. And these skills could also be bolstered by different courses offered at Bermuda College. So that's a big plug to Bermuda College. Their PACE programs offers a lot of quick diplomas and certifications that can help you, double down on some of these skills. So, skills being project management. If you guys have seen the PMP course, professional project management placement, opportunities they have through the college, great opportunity. And you pass the exam, you get your money back for the course. Public speaking advocacy. I've run around the world speaking. That's me at Yankee Stadium in New York, speaking at a Rotary conference. On picture under that's me speaking at the UN headquarters in Geneva. and just different opportunities as well. Fundraising and budgeting, grant writings at the heart of these organizations. A lot of times you have to go out and seek money. That's a piece of sales and marketing as well. It's a great skill to have in this current climate. Networking and collaboration. I met some amazing people on the journey, and just you'd be surprised that even internationally, like anywhere I go, somebody always knows a Bermudian. I've had people in like Dubai and New York and Chicago put me in contact with Bermudians in my sector in Bermuda, and I'm like, I met you halfway across the world. How are you introducing me to somebody in my own country, in my own sector that I haven't met? So I think sometimes that networking and collaboration is an awesome opportunity that you could gain through this volunteering ecosystem. Empathy and resilience and grit. Sometimes working in the volunteer sector, you're exposed to a lot of the harsh realities of life. It's one a part of just growing up and maturing and becoming an adult. You got exposed to these harsh realities. Sometimes people were really starving. People were living in adverse poverty, even in Bermuda, sometimes even going on in other parts of the world. I think we're very fortunate in Bermuda that the climate crisis isn't causing us mass destruction and death, but other parts of the world it's causing huge destabilization of countries, and countries hundreds of times bigger than Bermuda, with war and famine and migration crises. And so definitely, you have to have empathy for these people, even though they're not Bermudians and they're across the world, and we're here in our bubble. I think still having empathy for these people that are suffering and just seeing a way, and even if it's a small way, if you could donate, if you could work online and volunteer online with some of these humanitarian organizations, I think it's a great way to pay it forward for sure. And empathy is really a skill that I think I've learned and helped, refine through these, opportunities. Resilience is necessary, working in these organizations isn't easy. None of that sounds easy, but I think having the resilience to work through it and to, pay it forward and to rely on your team and to have these types of dynamics is really important. I think resilience is at the heart of that. Counseling and what's the word I put after that? I don't even let me look.
You can hide that thing.
Communication, I think. Can I hide it?
Yeah.
It's crazy, I should know this presentation.
Yeah, hide it.
Communication skills. So I think being able to communicate effectively, especially when you're trying to seal the deal, getting funding for these organizations, when you're trying to get a project or a program across, when even you're trying to bring opportunities back to Bermuda, I think that communication skill is like one of the best things you could ever have to really drive home the point and sales. As to the importance of what you're trying to do, and counseling as well, working, leading teams, leading organizations. I've had the opportunity to participate in a few organizations that have named me president, vice president. I think that those counseling skills are really important for conflict management. For example, for you guys, have you worked in a group project and you've been the one who's done like most of the work in the project? You've got to, help to, manage those dynamics in your group and not come off aggressive. If you come off aggressive, the project's not going to get done, and that's going to affect your grade as well, right? So I think having that opportunity to, balance between being firm and assertive, but also to get across that, we need to work together. And I think counseling is also a really important part of that. So the challenges in volunteering is the next slide. And I think this one is definitely an elephant in the room. It's not easy, especially time is money. When you're giving up your time for no money, there's got to be, you got to get something from that, right? In this example, we're talking about experience. Experience is almost just as important. Nowadays, degrees don't show you a job at all. You could spend time in your master's. If you get a PhD, you may be straight. But I've met plenty of people that have their PhD and still can't find a job because they end up now being overqualified for underqualified market. So I think definitely that experience is such an important factor that a lot of young people need, especially if you're in a sector where experience may not be readily available in Bermuda. If you're not, like I said, in the financial sector, other sectors that, have a bit more opportunities to engage, and to get experience, then you are in some trouble sometimes. But I think you can gain that experience through volunteering with these organizations. So start small, even if it's 1 or 2 hours a month, just get involved, make relationships, learn familiar faces, get an understanding of the organization, get an understanding of the sector as well and how it works and operates. Even if it's for a little bit of time a month. Financial constraints, a lot of these opportunities don't require any money, but if you have philanthropic endeavors or you have aspirations to start giving back, I think you can start small. $100 goes a long way. Sometimes when you're giving to these volunteer groups, and even if you can't do $100, maybe that's a lot, I don't know, but $50, $20, just sometimes you could get back. And also, if you have a project or a program that you want to get off the ground, or you want to get involved, a lot of times stipends are involved. Always ask about the money. I don't know. I think a lot of times young people are scared to ask about the money, or people in general are scared to ask, okay, what's the money? What's the budget? What's available? But I think it's an important factor, and you have the right to ask. So definitely speak up if you want to volunteer. You want to get a better understanding of the financial tools and vehicles involved with the organization, project, or program. Barriers to entry. Volunteering looks very different for everyone that involves themselves in any organization. Normalize different forms of giving back, create welcoming, inclusive environments where everyone contribution is valid regardless of background. This is more for people in the room who may be a part of organization that is an NGO that may want to add youth to the board or incorporate into the governance structures. I think it really is important to make sure that you have the landscape, the ecosystem ready within your organizations to actually prepare for young people coming within them. And so, yeah, that's really important as well. So this picture to me represents something called succession planning. Paying it forward, passing the baton forward, carrying the torch forward. In Bermuda, we have a very, very old population, a very aging population that's only going to continue to get older, that are in the leadership roles of a lot of these organizations. A lot of these organizations, unfortunately, do not have youth within their governance structures, or would like to add youth, but don't know how to. But when I think of succession planning, I think it's one of the most important things an organization could do for its sustainability. Because we don't have youth on the board, then what happens when everybody gets old? Try to bring in youth into the culture, to the ecosystem. How are they going to get a real understanding of it? So when I think of succession planning, I think it's a necessary tool within all organizations, period, to have youth around the board, within the organizations, to better, involve themselves. And, I think it's a really important tool because, I know a lot of people that are older don't want to work past 65. They want an exit strategy. I think one of the easiest ways to have an exit strategy is to have youth around the table who are, engaged and listening and involved. And it's a great way to create those exit strategies. So yeah, building on that, I'll be talking about improving the landscape for youth in Bermuda's third sector. What are some of the things you can do to make it matter, to make it better? Offering meaningful roles, not just busy work, making sure that, if you volunteer, if you will volunteer, so not just doing jack, around the organization, within the business, within whatever, making sure that the roles they're given, they're learning, they're growing, they're getting valuable experience. And that's something you have to think about and incorporate within, whatever structures you're trying to do, create, and also that also directly links into creating mentorship pipelines within the organization. I take you guys have had jobs. Everybody in here, I take it, has had jobs. So I don't know if you remember your first day or your first week you went in the organization. I hope you had a mentor. I hope you had somebody looking out for you to give you an opportunity to understand how the business runs, some of the different dynamics within the organization. But if you haven't, I'm sorry to hear that. And that is also a reality that many people face. It's the reality of coming to an organization, not having a mentor, or not having somebody to help you kind of understand the ropes. And if you end up doing it all on your own, you're going to eventually make mistakes. And nobody wants to make mistakes, right? But it is a part of learning. It's part of growing. It's part of maturing, especially in an organization. For the senior people in the room who want to actually incorporate youth into their organizations, it's definitely a great opportunity, a great thing to have mentors available to help them get understand the ropes. Open seats for youth people on boards, committees, and decision-making processes. And some of our research in the different organizations I work with, it's a saying of nothing for us without us. I think that's what it's called. It's basically what it's trying to say is, you can't make decisions for youth or for the benefit of the future of youth without youth in the room. And I think that translates not just NGOs, but into the wider society of Bermuda. Even recently with the voting for the government, we didn't have youth on audit. Youth weren't able to be on audit to vote for their future. I think that also directly, impacts, the future youth are going to face. So making sure that there are opportunities like absentee ballots for this, example, for the wider community is important because youth need to be around the table to be able to make decisions for their future. I think that's a very, 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 very important factor. But also, there's opportunities to actually get involved on boards on the government website. I know every year, somebody be able to help me out with this. There is an opportunity to put your name forward to be on government boards and different government committees. I know if anybody puts their emails down, I'll get the information for that and send it. If anybody is interested in being on any boards within organizations or committees, then, please reach out. I'll get the correct information for that, but I know that there are opportunities available to engage deeply within different boards within the government and within larger organizations. So keep an eye out, read the newspaper. There are often ads in the newspaper for that. So, look online, keep an eye out. These platforms for youth are active. Like I said, this is for organizations looking to engage with more youth. You got to be on Instagram, you got to be on TikTok, Twitter. A lot of these more youth-centric apps because they don't read the newspaper. I don't even read the newspaper every day, so I'm also a little guilty. But you got to meet youth where they are, you know what I mean? Promote flexibility, virtual options, short-term projects, creative volunteering, even on short-term contracts, promote the opportunity for youth to be flexible, not always in office, not always, they're doing mundane tasks, but give them a flexible schedule because many other times they're doing other things, they're doing their job that's actually paying them. They're in school, they may have a family, and they may have other responsibilities. So making sure that you accommodate their schedule through flexibility is very important. Building structures for youth to grow, establishing different things like youth advisory councils, youth advisory boards. Currently, one of the tasks we're working on with Teen Services, Teen Haven, and the wider mental health research group I was telling you guys about earlier. We have a youth advisory working group overlooking the creation of a digital youth app. We're creating a digital youth platform for youth suffering, for their mental well-being, if they need assistance with mental health. We have a youth advisory board working for our co-designers and being co-designers to actually help develop the application of this process. I think that is necessary for any programs, apps, technology, infrastructure, systems, initiatives for youth. I think having a youth advisory board to actually give feedback, co-design the process is really important. And I think there are also a lot of opportunities for youth to engage through those systems. Fund youth-led initiatives through grants and partnerships. If a youth organization would like to, do a project, do a program, pay it forward, fund them, invest in them, give them an opportunity to actually gain financing to assist with what they're trying to do. Provide training in governance, finance, and leadership. There's a lot of opportunities to fund youth to go to Bermuda College. I know there are a lot of scholarships available for people actually doing that, who want to give back, who want to, fund youth through these things. So definitely, I think Bermuda Scholarship is, I'm sure you guys, does everybody here have been on Bermuda Scholarship Board? You guys see the scholarships, the bursaries, the grants that are available. Definitely take advantage of that. One of the best pieces of advice I got while I was at Berkeley, where sometimes people don't even, apply for these grants or apply for these scholarships. Sometimes they even if you aren't qualified, still apply because a lot of times people don't apply for them, and then they go to you sometimes by people. So definitely apply broadly, and you'd be surprised the amount of money you can amalgamate to assist you with whatever you're trying to do. Encourage succession planning. We had a lengthy discussion on that on the previous slide, but who is next in line? Unfortunately, if somebody was to pass away or no longer to be able to lead their organization, who's next in line? Where's that pipeline of people to come in and continue the legacy forward for your organization? That is something very important that I think every organization should consider. And collaborate with schools and the college service learning pathways. I think a lot of times when people think of the career opportunities, it's a lot of times finance, entrepreneurship, and other kind of larger sectors. Sometimes people overlook the opportunities to actually make a living and make a good wage through nonprofit organizations. I think that's something we will continue to promote. And creating a pipeline for volunteership to leadership through some of the things we discussed, mentorship programs, skill-based volunteering projects, letting youth lead projects in areas where they, have interests. We've seen it a lot of times, like from my background, Youth Climate Summit. I was able to lead projects within these different committees around, agriculture. That was my niche back then. So, I was allowed to kind of spearhead different projects in my niche. So sometimes explore your niche, find out where your niche is, find out where your skill set is, and then you have the opportunity to deepen your engagement through some of these projects. And also making sure that these organizations have an opportunity for you to do that. Youth roles on boards and committees, offer junior advisory seats with real responsibility and voting power. Sometimes I say go a step beyond that, offer them actual positions on the board where the decisions actually affect the running of the organization. I think it's a very important thing. I have been grateful and had the opportunity to sit on a few boards locally, and sometimes the youth are the ones who steer the organization in the right direction, and sometimes there are what's the politically correct way to say this. Sometimes it goes back to empathy and integrity. I think a lot of times it's an important skill to have, and I think that's an important skill to then showcase on board where decisions are being made for the wider community, if that makes sense. Leadership development tracks, create internal pathways from volunteering to program leaders to then program coordinators. So you could go from volunteering to actually getting a career within these NGOs. And then job opportunities for volunteers, one of the most important things for, and it's this, I mean, part of it's true, but it seems like there's this, rumor that a lot of times, people within these volunteer roles are scraping for pennies. Well, sometimes it is the case in volunteer organizations that it is sometimes ran at a financial deficit. There are a lot of other great organizations, NGOs that are run, and you get, you can make a living. You can actually get a fulfilling role, an opportunity within these organizations to make, good money. And so, coming to the end of our presentation, these are just a tail bit of the youth-led organizations on island where impact's already happening. There's Rotaract Bermuda, which I serve as the vice president for, great organization. Bermuda is Love. I hope everybody recognizes this organization. This was the organization that really, really, deeply got me, there to deeply help me to re-engage with volunteering and help me to understand that it's more than meets the eye. They have this thing called relentless action. If anybody online from Media is Love is listening, shout out to you guys. One of my favorite charity on island, amazing organization. That's one called Relentless Action. They have consistent, consecutive, different projects, programs, services for the community. I think that's one of the most important things a nonprofit and somewhere in the third sector could have is consistent action, consistent, advocacy, where it's constant and people can rely and there's nowhere to go to actually get back to the community. There's the Youth Climate Summit and what different programs they run, the Bermuda Youth Connect and the National Youth Policy Working Group, all great organizazations and always looking for other youth to deepen their engagement. Bermuda is Love is putting on events constantly. Check them out on Instagram. I know for a fact, I know there is somebody in the room who I met through Youth Climate Summit. Shout out to you, Zara, did amazing work. Another, young star who does amazing work within that space. Bermuda Youth Connect, I don't know how engaged you guys were with this most recent election. They did a phenomenal job. Actually, a bit of background. I unfortunately didn't learn actually anything about Bermuda's kind of the way the political system runs in Bermuda in school. I learned it through Bermuda Youth Connect. They did an amazing job in educating me about the political system on island and through the UK as well, because we are overseas territory of the United Kingdom. Amazing organization if you want to deeply knowledge about how Bermuda runs and some of the most recent things happening on island, and even some things that happened in the past. Check out the YouTube videos, check out Instagram, and reach out to the organizers for a coffee. They're really, really easy. And the National Youth Policy Working Group, self-explanatory. They work on, giving recommendations and developing youth policy that affects young people on island. Really great organization. Check all of these organizations out, and they're already doing great things on island. So, and this is only a drop in the bucket. There are other amazing organizations and groups on island that are on the deepen engagement. So this is my last slide, closing out to young people. Don't wait to be asked, put yourself out there, really deepen your involvement, get involved with these organizations. And make sure it's in a cause that you care about. Back to that full circle moment, when you're doing something that, is authentically you find fulfillment in. Sometimes it takes you on a really amazing journey. There's a lot of great opportunities that come through working in these organizations and working in a sector that you want to build a career in. A lot of full circle moments, a lot of opportunities come in that. And at least when you're working in it, you're also knowing that the experience you gain is going to help, develop you in your career journey. And yeah, it's a gateway to the real world skills, mentorship, and meaningful careers. Start where your heart is and grow from there. The senior leaders and organizations make space, create a seat at the table for youth on board committees and in leadership pathways. So please consider that, carry the message far and wide, let people know that, if they want to make sure the organization has sustainability and has a legacy moving forward, that to make sure that there's a seat at the table for young people. Invest in their training, their trust their voices, and let them shape the future with you. Inclusion isn't optional. It's essential for our sustainability. So that's my talk today. Hope you guys would like to deepen your engagement with organizations in the third sector. It's a great way to gain experience and leverage career. I've done it. Plenty of other people have done that. Low background as well. I haven't been university. I dropped out of Bermuda College, I think my first semester. So there's so many untraditional methods of education. So different paths. Literally one of the things, many different paths. Choose yours. That's one of the slogans for the college. So many different paths. to get to where you're going in careers, to make a living, to make good money, to literally, propel yourself forward in our community. So I think volunteering is a great way to do that. So thank you guys for having me. I'll open up the questions. If anybody has a question, I'm open book. Yes, thank you.
Okay, good question. I love what you talked about with your gardening.
Mhm.
And I never thought of that because that's on my game plan today to get my carrots in the ground because we have a everlasting rainy season here. I don't know what's happening. But I never thought about helping a senior. Do you know which organization does that?
There's so many different ones that I can think of. They're always looking for deeper engagement. I know a lot of these senior day centers. They have different gardening plots out there. I know Habitat for Humanity has done the different initiatives around encouraging gardens for like places that are taking care of veteran seniors. Even like different organizations around arts and culture offer therapeutic services for seniors who are living with dementia, Alzheimer's, to get them out there, get their cognitive skills, working. They're online and there's a lot of opportunities. Please take my email. I'd love to talk, give you some direction after this. So I'm introduce you to some people if you would like to deepen your engagement with any senior organizations. I also do a bit of work with seniors. So, we can talk. All right.
It's a great message, a great pathway from volunteering into career development. So I think that's great. Do you know, Zane, if they still have a requirement in the high schools for community service?
Yes.
They do?
Yes. Help me out, guys. What's the number? It's like 200 hours?
I think it's 25 per year.
Oh,
Or actually, it goes up per year.
30?
Yeah, it starts the first one is 20, and it goes to 40 by the end, by S4.
Oh, wow. I swear it was more than that. I did a lot of hours back in high
That's
school.
good to know. Would you promote your presentation to the senior schools? I think it applies to the senior schools and perhaps middle schools also.
Yeah, I would love
Would you
to.
take your message to them, and then we can somehow sort of join forces, but to get the students.
Yeah, I think it would be a great opportunity, even if the signature school, initiative happening right now. That's a big piece of encouraging the younger students. You can work till you're 16. Some younger students do volunteering while they're younger, and then transitioning into when you're 16, have opportunity to deepen your engagement through the signature school initiative. They are supposed to be creating pathways to youth employment in the sectors that they are interested in. So I think prior to that, in the interim, giving the youth to your point, giving them opportunity to volunteer in these careers or these sectors that they may be interested in. So I'll be more than happy to brainstorm about that. I'm a big advocate for it. Yeah.
Yep.
Any more questions? Zane, that was really informative. Thank you. I think a lot of good ideas for young people and for us older people who are involved with various charities of how we can connect. A lot of information there, great presentation. Please take it to schools because we occasionally get students coming in, but I don't think they realize just what they can get out of it. They're doing it because they have to do it because they want the points, right? But I don't think they fully understand what they can gain from it as well. So that would be great if you could get it into schools too and make those connections. I've found it really hard to connect with teachers. Maybe you'll have a better chance connecting with the students because we need the teachers to open the doors for us. But that was really, really informative. I've learned a lot. I'm sure the rest of us have too. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just ask before you go, I'm sure Zane will be here for another couple of minutes if you have another question for him that you thought of. If you haven't signed in, would you please do that? And our next presentation, Bermuda College Best Presentation, is in April the 24th, which is a Thursday. We're finishing up with, I think, a very timely one. We're fortunate to have someone on Ireland through BIOS who has her doctorate in sustainable fisheries, which is a hot topic in Bermuda at the moment, along with climate change, how a fishery is going to adapt to climate change. So I hope you'll be able to join us next April the 24th. If we have your emails, you will get that information. Thank you very much for giving your time, everybody. And again, thank you very much, Zane. Much appreciated.
They're supposed to have a camera position. It's supposed to be a position.
It's like yoga might do this.
There's not a designated person. They have other responsibilities.
Yes,
So, that's how
Yeah, excuse me. Thank you very much.
But they don't use it.
So,
Thank you. Yeah, it is. Have you been to,
Kim.
I'm one of the main.
sorry, yes, there was
that
a
was
lot of
on-
information.
I know where I was trying my best. Like,
Yeah, sit you down.
I was talking with the community foundation. I work. Well, you've seen it. I work with our charity.
Yes,
So,
yeah.
It's been a hot.
No, you didn't. You didn't. You're right. And I'm like, wait, let me write. I'm gonna write it down.
Yes.
I,
Feedback.
I remember. I just had.
Yeah.
Yes.
A lot of information. I'll try to cut it down a bit.
Will look at your email and I will get back to you.
Yeah, it was very
Everyone too.
useful. Got to do better with Instagram.
Oh, I know. Yeah. Social media.
Yes,
No
yes,
worries, no
yes.
worries, no worries.
Yeah.
No, the idea is good at the time and then people.
Thank you for coming.
And it's just like.
Well, it's there if we want.